Before I forget to ask, this isn't related to this at all, but at some point, can I please have the recording from today?
Yes, it's already saved on my computer. I will write a note for myself.
Meg said, I think so. I clicked it and it looks like it's loading. Like, click the link in her invite.
Okay, cool.
Let's see. How do I get to my invite link? Go back to my calendar. Well, let me copy this
there's
from my calendar.
Megs. Let me get her in here.
So it seems like my Wi-Fi is good enough for you to like hear me fine, huh?
Yeah, you're absolutely fine.
Nice.
Great.
And y'all don't have your video on, do you?
No,
I don't
not
think
yet.
so.
Sorry.
Okay, I was like, am I broken?
Are we real life live on YouTube?
I think we are, because that's how we stream to the fundraising page, which is Network for Good. So
Side bang looks good.
side bangs popping.
Popping.
I'm thinking, Megs, if you want to share the slides on your computer, that way you can be in control of how fast they go, like when you advance to the next slide.
Okay.
And then that way I can keep an eye on the chat in case Braden's signal is lost. And cool. I will have the recording on my end. Yeah, it just seems to be easier to keep an eye on the chat when you're not also sharing your screen, you know?
Hey, heard that.
Yeah.
Heard that. Is there anything, I've never done a Canva presentation. Is there anything I need to know? Is it like, I probably don't need my lanyard, although, wow, I look like a
You look like a school person, yeah.
It'll give you like in the top right, you have to click present, and then I think you have to choose full screen from there. And then like your mouse is going to be a pretty good size, like blue dot.
Okay.
So you'll just like click to the right or left of the screen, depending on which way you're trying to scroll.
Cool.
I think you can also use arrow keys too, but just so you know.
Okay. I wonder. I'll be that person. Can you see my screen?
Can you hear me? Can you see my screen?
You're on mute. You're on mute.
There are some people I just wish they would stay on mute.
You know? Man. Just that kind of day.
Mm-hmm.
How are you opening?
Yes.
this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will I'll handle all the back end stuff. I'll get everyone in. Although I did make you and Braden co-hosts, so if the worst happens and I lose my connection, the meeting will still go on.
Listen, that would be the worst.
It's happened. Lesson learned.
I guess.
Yeah.
Intense.
And yeah, I'll open us up and get us started, and then I'll take cues from you.
Okay.
Yeah. If there's anything, if I see anything that we need to like clarify or anything, I'll ask in the moment. Otherwise, we'll take Q&A probably more towards the end. Yeah.
I'm guessing, I don't know, it's like kind of just as a first go, like figuring, like kind of guessing what they need, and I'm sure we'll get whatever at the end, and I'm fully expecting not to know most of the answers because there might not be any.
Yeah,
which is one of
I
the
agree. Yeah.
one of the things, except I mean it's always not necessarily like a what, it's more of like a who or a where or a I don't know.
I agree. Just as a heads up, I'm just looking at the waiting room right now. Like I can see one person, her name is Beth. She runs a podcast called Safe at Home. The focus of her podcast is not the fact that she and her wife are lesbians raising a kid, but the fact that her kid really struggles with substance abuse. And
Okay.
so the focus of hers is really like kind of presenting to parents, like what I wish I had known at the beginning of this journey kind of stuff. So I'm saying that if she reaches out to you to be a guest on our podcast, like don't be surprised, but also don't feel like you have to do this or do it because I know like this isn't the thing that's bringing you joy right now. So
well, it's a collision of enough worlds since it's with you two, and it's queer stuff that it's like, yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. And
it's fine.
Honestly, it's something that we don't have it offered in our schools, which is why this exists. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting topic, and it was really actually super interesting to research because it's pretty weak.
Got it. The only other name I'm recognizing in the waiting room right now is a couple. Their last name is Pemberton. And okay. I know that of their 4 kids, 2 have come out. 1 has already struggled with self-harm.
Okay.
Yeah. But everyone else, I don't recognize their names. So these are like new people to us.
I got Rachel I was a year behind her in grad school. I haven't seen her for 11 years, or I've maybe had a couple conversations with her, and Andrea was my roommate in grad school. She's a psych.
Nice.
I think they both just want to be able to like forward information and kind of get the queer lens on it too.
I love it.
And I haven't met Illuminate. Is that how you say it, right?
I don't know.
In person.
In person, yeah. I haven't either. She's been in the ecosystem around at different meetings, but I haven't met them in person. I think that I think that she's overseas somewhere. I think she's international.
Yes. Well, actually, I think she just moved to Texas, but I believe she's from Brazil.
I'm going to go ahead and admit everyone.
Okay.
Since we're at 5:01. Awesome. And once I see everyone's kind of connected to audio, everyone's coming in. Excellent. This is the time where I always feel like I need to have music playing in the background, or maybe like a fun crossword on the screen or something. I don't know.
A Wordle.
A little Wordle action happening. Yes. Welcome, everyone. Once the majority of us are hooked up to audio, then I will talk about the recording and what that will entail. Make sure you are pinned up. Excellent. We have a few more coming in. This is a great turnout. I usually expect like half of the registered people to actually show up live, and that's usually like a generous, but this is a really good percentage of everyone who RSVP'd.
Great follow through.
Yeah, these are dedicated people. Well, welcome everyone. I'm just going to let everyone know we are going to record this because we do want this available for other parents. That's really important. This information is pretty hard to come by right now. So it will be recorded. And if you do not want your face or your real name on the screen, feel free to turn your video off, feel free to rename yourself, whatever you want to do, like really protect your privacy. You can send, if you have questions and you don't want to be known, you can feel free to send me a private message in the chat, and I will make sure your question gets answered in a private way. And yes, so again, I'm going to start the recording, and I just want to let everyone know that if you don't want to be on the screen for any reason, feel free to take your video off, change your name, whatever you want. If anyone hasn't renamed themselves and would like to, just click on the 3 dots on your upper right corner. You can add your pronouns to your name, or you can rename yourself, or you can just take your name off completely. Whatever you'd like to do is totally fine. And we want this to be as safe a space as possible, while we also want to record it for future parents who have questions like this. So, excellent. All right, we're just going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, if that's all right. We're just going to talk about how this meeting is going to flow and answer any questions you might have up front. So my name is Elena Joy. I'm the founder of Pride and Joy Foundation. I get to host these meetings that we offer through a program called Pride and Joy Parents. We try to meet at least quarterly and provide some empowering information for parents, teachers, caregivers, mentors of LGBTQ youth. We feel like this is a big gap in our society where the people who need the most empowerment to support our vulnerable populations are not getting the information that they need to be able to do that effectively. So that's what we use these meetings for. We're really excited. The topic today is about self-harm, how to spot it, how to ask about it, how to listen to their answers, how to create a plan. And it's all being done with our resident high school psychologist. Megs Pulvermacher is here with us, and it's going to all be coming from her. So excited for this. If you have questions as we go through this, please feel free to put those in the chat. I will be watching the chat along with, in the audience is Braden Browning, pronouns they, them. They are our director of operations, and they're also going to be lending some support on the back end as long as their Wi-Fi signal holds out. So feel free, again, you can either message me or Braden privately, or you can put it publicly in the chat. If it's something that we need to interrupt Megs for and kind of get some clarification before she moves on, I will be happy to do that. Otherwise, we're also happy to answer any and all questions that we can answer at the end as well. We're hoping to not go over about 45 minutes, but we also want to make sure that you all get the information that you want and that you need. We do have a lot of resources that will be coming to you either through the chat today or a longer list that will come in the replay email that you will get tomorrow at the email address that you signed up for this meeting with. Okay, I think we're ready, and I think we should go. Megs, how do you feel?
I feel ready. I feel ready.
Excellent. Hey, and Megs, I can see your screen.
I was gonna say, we were just talking about I get to be the guy who says, "Can you see my screen?" And so we're all good there. So hello everybody. Like Elena said, well, we'll get to a little bit more of an introduction of me in a minute, but just to kind of get started for what our goal is here today and what we really want to create as a resource for you. These are kind of the things that we want to hit on. We want to create a space that is safe. This is a space that we intend for you to be able to ask questions, to get support, to bop on over to community over here, to really just, there's a lot of power in being in community with folks who are on a similar journey, whether that's a parent, a caregiver, an educator, a youth mentor, or whatever it is that has brought you here today. It's really powerful to be in that space with other people who are in the same mindset, because it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability and really awesomeness to show up in a space like this, because this is a really emotionally charged, heavy, very real topic. And the simple fact that you're here today and there are other people in the space with you solely lets you know that this is not a topic where if you're dealing with it, you are alone. It's something that's difficult, and being a community is one of the best ways that we can support each other and support those in our lives that we're trying to get over here and support even better. We also want to talk about awareness and skills, increasing awareness of the risk of self-harm, understanding it a little better. There's a lot of stigma out there about what it is, who does it, why they're doing it, what it means. And even with folks who work with kids every day or who've had kids for years, it can be kind of this enigma that just feels like a really scary thing. And so just putting some of the facts on the table and gaining a little more understanding, I think is, oh, my mom is here, I'll admit her, is really powerful in helping you to feel more empowered to support other people, because having more of the information can make it a little bit easier of a topic to approach and to understand some of the ways that you can really effectively respond to it and be supportive and be there for the person you're supporting in the way you want to be. We'll talk a little bit more about the why behind some of the behavior, although these are very unique situations. So no one situation or reason it's occurring or way that will help to reduce it is going to be the same, but we'll kind of give you a general overview. And like Elena said, we'll get into some Q&A toward the end. And then we'll talk about some steps going forward that you can take to address it and really kind of create this wraparound resource with some avenues that you might not have thought of, or ways that you can reach out and get your child or the person you're supporting some more support. And we want to be able to learn more about how we can support you going forward, and different resources that you might know about that we might not, because we all have different lenses and we're all over the country as far as where this stuff is going and coming from. And there's all kinds of regional nuance, particularly to supporting queer youth. So we want to be able to carry this forward and be a resource for our community too. So much to cover. Here's kind of what we're gonna get into specifically. We're gonna talk about self-harm, what it is, how prevalent it is, some of the stigma that I was talking about before, risk and protective factors, because there are both for LGBTQ plus youth. LGBTQ plus is really fun to say, but I'll probably say queer most of the time because it's only one syllable, but that's what I mean when I say it. We'll talk about supporter self-assessment. That's you, which is super important. And really, we're going to get into the plans and the logistics of how to deal with a lot of this. But what I find to be most helpful and empowering for folks in being able to carry this this work forward and have productive responses and be the support they're trying to be is really to have an understanding of where they're coming from and being able to regulate their own emotions and ability to be supportive around a really scary thing. So that's one of the big takeaways we're really looking for tonight. We'll talk about it, identifying some signs that self-harm may be occurring. If you're not sure, you're kind of wondering, and different ways that you can gather information, because you have a lot more resources than you might think for gathering that information as well. We'll talk about the Ask, Listen, Plan model, which is a Pride and Joy classic, and how you can start the convo with your child and getting support to start that, because as we know, it's not always easy to get your teenager to talk to you or teenagers just in general. It doesn't have to be yours. We'll talk about listening and really building a collaborative relationship, as opposed to, we really like to tell and set boundaries and direct, and how it can look to be more of a collaborative partner when you're talking to a youth you're trying to support. We'll talk about plans and ways that you can come up with a safety plan with your child, the student you're serving, the youth you're mentoring, and the value of looking at reduction of occurrences versus trying to eliminate or prohibit the behavior altogether. and then we'll talk about building your support network and Q&A fun time, which, believe it or not, is not a bullet that I wrote. Elena wrote that. Good job. What we will not do tonight, we're not going to debate civil rights. We're not offering legal advice. We're not offering mental health advice. This is not a therapy session per se. It is more of an avenue to give you some resources to access some of those things and to allow you to not have to be a mental health professional, but to be an empowered, informed support person for whoever it is you have in mind as we go forward tonight. So, Elena Joy, you already got to meet. There's me in the exact same sweater, but my hair is a little more flat because I got my headphones on. And this, I love this title because I am a school psychologist. I've been working as a school psychologist for 10 years, which is just pretty mind-blowing to me because I just don't feel, not that 35 is old, but I just don't feel that old. And I am also, what qualifies me to talk about this is that I am a member of the LGBTQ plus community as well. And this is a really cool kind of collision of my worlds. The way that I know Elena and have gotten more involved with Pride and Joy Foundation is when I'm not being a school psychologist, I run an online community for queer identifying entrepreneurs, creatives, and change makers. And it's called the Queer Impact Collective. So it's really about creating a queer affinity space to help queer adults to maximize their impact in the world and do a lot of work largely associated with this. I also host a podcast called Out What Now that is all about navigating the ups and downs of the coming out journey while having as much fun as possible. And that is actually a really phenomenal resource if you need one right off the top. We've had a lot of discussions just about different people's coming out journeys, things they've overcome. We talk a lot about mental health, about accessing community, and really what it looks like to thrive as a queer human out here, despite a lot of the challenges that we experience, which is the topic today, but something to check out for sure. How are we doing in the chat so far, Elena? Are we good?
We are good. Yeah, there's a topic to bring up once we get to the ask section, but we're good.
Phenom.com. All right, let's get into some self-harm basics. So self-harm, or you might, if you're doing some research, you've probably seen it referred to as non-suicidal self-injury, or NSSI, which is a self-inflicted act that causes pain or superficial damage, but is not intended to cause death. And I kind of want to start there that, and we'll get to this on the next slide actually, but my brain's going there already, that this is a behavior that is intended to mitigate the risk or the act of suicidal behavior. It's an intention, the intention there is to be alive, to stay alive, and to just kind of manage life as it's happening in the moment or the day or the week and all of those pieces. So that is really important. That can look like a lot of different things. This is not an exhaustive list, but cutting is certainly one of the most common that most people are familiar with, have heard of, have maybe experienced or dealt with. Scratching or picking at scabs or skin, burning, hitting, pulling hair out, and those types of things as well. So let me move this bar because oh no. Here we go. All right. So self-harm and stigma. Like I said, just the number of people in this room right now tells you that if you are supporting someone who's engaging in self-harm, you are most definitely not alone, nor is the child or the youth that who you are supporting. And it's far more common than most people recognize. And one study, this was from 2015, and there are a bunch of different percentages out there and whatever, so I kind of picked the average one. Okay, but about 18% of youth, that is just youth in general, report engaging in self-harm or NSSI within the past 12 months, which is significant. That is approximately 1 in 5 if math isn't really your thing. I'll take it there for you. And LGBTQ plus identifying youth are 3 times more likely to engage in NSSI as their non-identifying peers. A large stigma that's out there is that kids are doing it for attention, or they're just being dramatic, or it's like a goth thing, or all of these different out there things that people say. Or if you're taking it to a queer spot, like, oh, like, all the queer kids are doing it, and that's just something that they do to like be a part of the community or whatever. But really, as far as attention goes, it's often hidden. Most people do not report. They try to cover it up. There's a lot of shame, perception of isolation, because they feel like it's something that not a lot of folks are doing. There are some cases out there, certainly, where there can be some folks will find community with other students or other youth who are engaging in self-harm, and that's kind of another case. But for the most part, it's something that people aren't out here trying to talk about, whether that's the person doing the self-harming or parents or families who are trying to support them, because there is that stigma, shame, or inability to access services or express what it is they need, and all of those things. So why then? Why would you self-harm? Why would a kid who has a good home life, has great academic skills, or has like good things going for them, why would they engage in something like self-harm that is so physically painful? It's difficult to look at. There's scars and all of these things. Well, there are a lot of reasons, but all behavior is a form of communication. And this is true for absolutely everyone. We use behavior to communicate if we're using a turn signal to change lanes. I personally put headphones on at the gym, even if there's no music on, to communicate people to leave me alone. And usually we're trying to either get something, to communicate something, or we're trying to remove something. If we want people to leave us alone, or we're trying to get rid of some kind of pain or anxiety, or we're going to happy hour to relieve the stress of the work week, or whatever. We have these behaviors that help us to get things and to communicate what it is that we need, or that we don't want. So most youth, when they're engaging in this behavior, they report that it's a coping mechanism that helps them to relieve unbearable emotions, to reduce internal tension, and that they feel empty or numb. So right there, you can see they're either trying to handle relieving tension, or to relieve an emotion that they might not be able to name, and thus aren't able to find a more adaptive way to deal with the emotion. Or they might be trying to just feel something, whether it's pain, or to be able to distract their mind by seeing the result of the self-injury or whatever they have going on. And we can pretty easily identify, all of us sitting in here, that it's a maladaptive coping technique, right? There are a lot safer or less alarming to the eye and to certainly the parental heart to deal with different types of stress or emotions that are coming up. But for them, it is adaptive. It's what's keeping them going. It's what's bringing them back down to baseline. And so far, it might be all they have that actually works. And like I said, there can be a lot of different things that go into that, and each situation is unique, and we can get into some of those with when we get into Q&A, but kind of a general idea of what's going on there. So looking at queer youth specifically, and kind of the queer experience, if we're talking about unbearable internal struggle or emotional stress or feeling isolated and those types of things, we can take a stroll down the queer experience here and look at a number of risk factors. And we have risk factors and we have protective factors. So a risk factor is something that a circumstance or an experience that might increase the likelihood that we may see some self-harm behavior. And then protective factors are resources or connections or life experiences that might mitigate that or lessen the likelihood of engaging in self-harm behavior, to kind of take you there for a second. So some risk factors for queer youth. This is kind of a weird way that I slash this out, but homophobic, biphobic, or transphobic environments, which could range from a kind of a micro experience, like being at home or in your family. Church, not a super fun place for queer folks, typically. School, all the way up to society in general, right? Because we live in a society where, whether we know it or not, we, as queer folks, we get the message pretty much from the beginning that who we are and the way we exist in the world is a suboptimal way to exist. And that is a very difficult thing to overcome. You can have the most loving, accepting family, you can go to an affirming church, but we all move throughout society in a lot of different venues as we go through our day. And it is really hard to find a bubble where you're not going to run into some of these more phobic environments that send a message about our worthiness to be, to love, to exist. And so that, as you can imagine, is really stressful. Bullying is a huge one. I think, if you're in schools, if you work in schools, if you spend time in schools, you know that it's still prevalent. Bullying is a thing. Schools are not safe places still for queer kids. They are becoming safer. There are some places where it is a lot easier, depending on where you are geographically, regionally, those kinds of things, and what the culture is around there, but that is a very real thing. And to one up that, we have cyberbullying as well. So you can take bullying with you in your pocket. And just like, if you have a cavity and you keep trying to suck on the tooth to see if it's still there, we tend to kind of perseverate or go back to a lot of those cyberbullying instances, and kids will really focus on those and lock in some of those messages if that's something that they're experiencing. So that can be really stressful as well. Difficult coming out experiences, which can range from school to home and all kinds of other places, similar to the environments we talked about up top. Social isolation, exclusion, rejection, even if it's in isolated areas, that can be extremely emotionally taxing, and something that, as we're in like the prime time of identity development, can be really, really impactful and difficult for a student to deal with. And then conversion therapy, if that is a reality, Elena can speak to this better than I can, but something that is even close to an option, the threat of it, the mention of it, or even learning about it, that it could be a possibility, can be pretty stressful, damaging thing that could lead to self-harm as well. Let's talk about protective factors, because we could use a change in the mood, right? So protective factors, all of you can be, are most likely a protective factor for any LGBTQ plus youth you have in your life. If it's your child, if it's a student you serve, if it's your child's friend, you could be a protective factor by your allyship, the language you use, the fact that you're here tonight learning about how to support your child or the people in your lives. You are a positive, powerful connection, and that literally is a life-saving thing. So props to you again. Having access to affirming, that's important, affirming mental health support, whether that's therapy or groups or talking with a social worker, a psychologist at school, or different options that are out there. Having access to that can be a huge protective factor and skill builder for a youth to develop skills to help go to alternatives beyond self-harm. Affirming communities and connections, whether they're in person in the community or virtual, or just people they trust in the community or at school, or those kinds of things, that can be hugely impactful as well, which again would include you. Affirming medical and healthcare providers, this can be a big one for anyone, but particularly for our trans and non-binary kids, who are dealing with like body dysmorphia and all of the things that come up with that, or pronouns aren't being used correctly by providers who are like getting all up in your biz. That stuff is really important and can be a huge protective factor as well, because those are hugely impactful experiences. And then had to give a little shout out to the school support team. That can be a huge protective factor as well, which is not always the case. Again, all schools are different. Culture and community culture majorly impacts the services and the culture of a school, and where people are coming from in supporting students in the way students need to be supported versus the way they're willing to support. So that can be a protective factor, though, if you have a solid school team that you can reach out to and get support from. There is oftentimes a lot more support in that setting than parents and families are aware of, that they're able to access and utilize. That can be hugely impactful because it's a huge chunk of your child's day. So there we go. We're good on the chat. Elena, any questions? Did I miss anything?
No, you didn't miss anything at all. I think we're still good.
Yeah, let's go. All right, the supporter self-assessment, fun time. This is just, oops, backwards. This is an opportunity to just take a look at where you are at, because kind of like I talked about at the beginning, this is a really intense, scary thing. It's scary if you are just suspecting that that your child might be engaging in something like this. If you've already experienced it, if you're working on dealing with and managing and getting supports in place to manage it right now, it is so important to take time to pause, to acknowledge your humanness and the need to take care of yourself so that you can best support your child or the student you're showing up for, or whatever, because you are a human and you have your own experiences that have shaped the way that you react to things and what it is that you need to be able to show up in an empathetic, calm, and supportive way that is going to help you and to help your child and to improve the situation for all involved. So it's important to just check in with, what are you feeling? Why are you feeling that way? What are the actual underlying factors? What does it bring up for you in in your own experience, and what kind of those initial gut reactions are to hearing information, or maybe you get a call from school that their staff are suspecting that your child might be engaging in self-harm, and like where that takes you on the emotional scale so that you can identify those feelings, and then what or who do you need to get your needs met, whether that's a parental support group or your own therapist, which, yay, therapy. Everyone loves therapy. Everyone should have a therapist. That's good. And making sure that you're keeping yourself at baseline so that that you're able to support and show up with empathy and collaboration versus fear, blame, withdrawal, and rolling in there. You know, we all say things we don't mean, or we wish we hadn't said, or we wish we would have said better if we're in a situation where it's scary. And I do definitely want to acknowledge that there are all different increments of time we have to do this kind of assessment, right? Like if you're in a crisis situation and you need to respond in the moment, you probably don't have time to like go do 8 minutes of box breathing, right? And get yourself back to baseline. But just the mindset or some of the practice that you can do over kind of the long haul to get yourself in a space where you have an idea of what you can do if you're getting yourself into those crisis situations, or you find yourself in a crisis situation like that, so you can react better, or maybe switch out if you have a partner or another resource, if you can kind of play around with those connections and who's in the best space to approach and kind of mitigate some of those things. All right. So some logistics here, just some indicators or signs of self-harm. And again, not an exhaustive list, but some things that you might see or notice. A significant change in mood or behavior, if you know about, or you're or come to know about, or maybe your child shares with you a stressful event that's happened. If it's like an academic thing, failing a test, a big project, something that hasn't gone well, a relationship, if a relationship has ended, if, and all of there can be a lot of layers to this stuff, right? And a lot of this are like typical things that you might see from a teen anyway, because everything is a big deal when you're a teenager. But if it's a significant change or something that you haven't seen before, or there's more like withdrawing from activities or friends, or a significant loss of interest in things they used to enjoy doing, those can be some kind of more of the emotional behavioral signs that you can kind of pick up on. If you notice wearing clothing inappropriate for the weather, 90 degrees, wearing a sweatshirt, long pants. I mean, some people are just into the pants thing, but you know, you probably can tell what is lying behind those choices, or if it's significantly happening. Just something to consider. If they're coming up with stories for like mystery cuts or bruises or burns or marks that are coming up, you know, got the dog scratched me, ran into a tree, like just kind of out there stuff that seems like it's getting made up on the fly, or you're noticing some repeating stories, that can be a sign as well. Scars or wounds that just don't seem to heal, or they're recurring, can be a sign that they're being reopened or picked, or it's something that's happening more frequently. Or if you find a collection of kind of sharp objects, whether it's like a separated razor, or like paper clips, or different kind of pieces like that, is another thing that you might see too. that would be a sign to get into having a conversation. So within the ask, listen, plan model, those are the things we're going to do. We're going to ask what we want to start with here. I've kind of alluded to it a little bit. You want to frame this up, go into this conversation with empathy, without judgment, without blame, and really creating safety to have a conversation, which again, this is before you go into a conversation like this, you're going to want to look at where you're at and make sure that you're regulated and calm and able to go into that conversation with being able to create that safe space. So starting the conversation, the best way to do it, the most fun answer ever, it depends. There are a lot of factors that go into it. It kind of depends if your child is even willing to talk to you in the first place, what the situation is, the timing. You really want to go in there. I think the primary thing to remember is that your child probably isn't going to remember the exact words that you said or what you started with, but it's more, this sounds kind of cheesy, but how you made them feel or how the tone of the conversation, because there's a lot of underlying messaging that goes into some of that. So you want to make sure that you're reassuring them of safety, they're not in trouble, you're not blaming them, using that calm voice, non-judgmental demeanor, we're not rolling eyes, scoffing, and making it about you. I think that is a big key as well, because this is not necessarily the time for I feel statements, because what we're worried about right now is what your child feels or what the student we're serving is feeling. And I think one of the best ways to kind of open the conversation, particularly if you're aware that the behavior is happening, or maybe you've seen scars or you've seen them engage in the behavior, is just acknowledgement of the awareness of the behavior and not ignoring it, not talking around it, but really framing the conversation to learn more about why, how it's helping them, when it's coming up for them, and kind of just try to get some more information about where they're coming from and how it is helping them. And like I said, they may not be ready or willing to talk about it. Other support options or connections to start the convo might be needed. And I think there is a parental lens component there where, you want to be the one that your child is able to talk to. And this very well could be something that they're just not willing to go to yet, but there are resources out there that you can access, whether it's depending on your school situation. You can call a trusted member of the school staff, even if they don't have a like a school psychologist or a school social worker, counselor. Those are all kind of different roles, which that's not what this training is about, but you ask for one of them, you can kind of get the same information. But even if they don't have a relationship with your child, they can find things out, talk to your students' teachers, find out who their connections are, where is there a trusted relationship, and kind of try to help facilitate or get some more information about what might be going on there that might get you a foot in the door to be able to have a conversation. Did you say there was something on this slide already, Elena, or?
Yeah, and I think that it's a really common question, and it goes from both the child perspective and the adult perspective. I think oftentimes we as adults kind of pull back from questioning them because we're worried it's going to, quote, re-trigger them, right?
Mhm.
And our kid can play that card as well. Like our
Yep.
kid can say, I don't want you to ask me about if I'm self-harming, Mom, because that's a trigger for me. Like
Mhm.
they know how to use those words. So first of all, is that valid? If just asking them 6 months later, how are you doing with self-harming? Is that a potentially negative trigger? And then secondly, like, how can we respond to our kid when they say that? Because it's our job as parents to check in, right? But
Yeah.
what's the knowledge around triggering?
Well, I think when we're getting into triggers, there's a lot of different things that can be a trigger. So I would maybe investigate what it is they mean when they say that, which is something that a lot of times if we get the no, then we cut it off. But if they're going to take it to a place where they're sharing another element of what it is they're experiencing, well, when you check in on that, or however you're framing it up or whatever, you're getting a response that's triggering for me, you can get some more information about that. So I would almost kind of come back with just trying to support whatever level it is they're willing to talk about, and you can sort of whittle it down. If they're not going to keep talking to you, then they won't keep talking to you. But I think that is a way to keep the conversation going and probably still get back to square one. But I think also it's a valid way to feel. But for the child, when you check in, I mean, there's so many variables, because it could be the relationship, previous experiences in that particular relationship, or even offering another connection is there someone else who might not be as triggering, or someone you would prefer to talk to, because we're glad to get you whatever support you need, or that feels less triggering for you. Was there another part of that question, or did I hit all of it?
No, I think that was it. I think the main concern is just like making sure, okay, I can bring this up and that's not actually going to cause damage, but actually like bringing up and talking about what is a trigger for you. Like I imagine if my daughter had said that back to me when I checked in with her, right? Like, and she's all about avoiding the difficult conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I can totally see her being like, I don't want to talk about this with you, Mom. Like this feels triggering for me. That would be like, my response would be similar. It would probably be, oh, okay, what does a trigger feel like to you? Like, what do you feel when you're triggered? And what else is in your life that triggers you? And then I probably would pursue like that same path of, it might be triggering because you and I have been in these intense emotional conversations before, and maybe that's the trigger, right? And so is there someone else that we can ask to check in with you on a regular basis, because we love you, we value you, and your safety is important to us.
Love that.
Cool.
Nailed it. Nice.
Nice.
Nice. All right. Effective listening skills. So clutch. So clutch. Listening is amazing. We get the most information that helps us to create a plan, to provide the kind of support that our child or the person we're helping is trying to communicate to us that they need. So I think similarly to what we just kind of talked about, the aim here is to really understand the why behind the behavior. And your child might not even know exactly what it is. So through kind of a line of questioning of, tell me more about, kind of like Elena was saying, what that feels like, what that looks like, when things are happening, what kind of experiences are you having that send you to this place where it feels like your only option right now is to self-harm. And really, you can, through helping them share, you get to learn more about their experience, and they get to learn more about themselves as well, because it might not be a line of questioning that they have gone down with themselves before, or even thought to engage in, or have the skills, or even the language or the vocabulary to dig into what is really going on here, or where do I feel it? What does it feel like? How else could I get that feeling in a way that makes me feel more safe, and in all of those kinds of things. So kind of looking at the urge, you'll students will kind of describe this sort of urge to do the self-harm. Like they'll kind of reach this threshold of, I can like hang in there and get through the day, and now I've kind of reached my limit, and this is my option. Like I need this pain out of here, I need this distress out of here, or I haven't had a feeling all day. I guess we're going with pain at this point, and identifying what that urge feels like, when they usually feel it, what happened before, who were they around, who did they interact with, did they have a test that day, did they not see a certain person, or maybe a community that they love accessing that helps them to kind of regulate, the meeting got canceled, or something to that effect, so they can kind of start to understand patterns, and you can too, to kind of bump up some of the support and the protective factors as you start to notice some of those patterns. And then also talking about, how does it feel after? How do you feel relief? And is there anything else that you do in your life that offers that same level of relief? Or how can we kind of mirror that in a more adaptive or functional kind of way? Also talking about who it is they trust, or who they have a connection with. If they can identify who those people are, and then we can create more avenues or opportunities for them to interact with them, whether it's a peer or a specific teacher, or a person in the community, maybe a particular family member, or someone who just gets them, or wherever they're accessing that experience of having a trusting, safe connection with someone where they feel seen and affirmed and all of that stuff, how they can access that, or maybe have someone to kind of do those follow-ups with, if that's a challenging thing, particularly with a parent or someone who happens to be there most of the time. And then we can start looking for some alternatives or some additional supports as well. Plan. So with coming up with the plan, in the follow-up email here, I have some really cool resources that I didn't like go overly in depth on here, but some different templates, how do you say that word? Whatever. Templates to fill in some safety plans, or come up with a way to kind of start mitigating this behavior, to reduce it. Because one of the key things here is the goal isn't necessarily to stop this cold turkey. Would we love that? Of course we would, but it's not a reality, and it can really increase the likelihood of suicidal behavior as well, if we're putting in all of these things to make it impossible for them to engage in this behavior that might be one of the last things that's kind of keeping them hanging on. So what's important to remember is that we're really trying to reduce the frequency or intensity of what it is they're doing. So if it's something that they're engaging in once or twice a day, if we can get that down to every other day, or it's once a week and we're getting down to a couple of times a month, by giving them some other options to distract themselves, to engage in some less intense forms of the behavior. I was chatting with my good friend, Amy Canova, she is also a school psychologist. She runs the LGBTQIA2S+, I believe they've got a great acronym over there, group for the National Association of School Psychologists. And I was talking to her about this, and she offered some really cool alternatives, like instead of, if it's like a cutting situation, instead of cutting with the track, cutting across the track, or instead of using like a metal knife, using a plastic knife, or instead of cutting, like snapping a rubber band or holding ice cubes, or getting some kind of more intense sensory experience without the same level of harm or risk for something to get intense. Yes,
Max, can I interrupt you?
Please.
I didn't understand what you meant by across the track. What is the track that you're referring to?
Like the track, like on a wrist. Some students will cut like with the vein to move across the vein. This one will draw more blood and is generally
more
risky.
dangerous.
More dangerous.
Got it. Okay, so by going the other direction, we're simply mitigating risk again, and so that's just kind of the trend that we're going to. Got it.
Yeah, it's as we're putting plans together, kind of like I talked about on the last slide with the listening piece, it's important that this is collaborative, because this is really, the empowerment needs to be with the person we're supporting, right? Because they're the only one who can control what it is they actually decide to do. And so it's about creating a plan and really working with them to come up with a way for them to get a need met, to reduce the rate that we're seeing the self-harm behavior, but at the same time to build skills to eventually reduce it further as well. So it's this ongoing check-in, how, like, if that's working, if they want to try some other methods, and there's going to be some kind of hit and miss, trial and error as you go through. But it's really, really important to kind of put them in the driver's seat, but to also have that supportive adult who, actually has a prefrontal cortex, because not to get into too much of brain science here, but your prefrontal cortex doesn't even really get in there until you're 25. And that really helps with a lot of foresight and kind of seeing the big picture and understanding the finality of different behaviors and being able to kind of make good decisions. Right. So it's really a solid collaborative pairing to have an adult there to kind of facilitate this self-learning and self-management skill for your child to be able to kind of manage this themselves, because this isn't necessarily something that goes away or that they won't have to manage over an extended period of time, but you can get better at it and develop a lot of skills that can reduce it. Okay. I said that and I didn't even read it. And then I would say accessing whatever your child's community or school-based supports are, to kind of loop them in on what this plan is, or what you're working on, or how they can support you and your child in executing this plan and tweaking it and seeing how it's working, and what is being reported or seen, not necessarily verbatim, like in a therapeutic setting or like a community center situation or at school, and kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page with where folks are at, what the plan is, and how they can support across settings, which is super important and very helpful. A final word about finding support. I think I kept this in here from from the other presentation. But what I would say is in building your support network, schools are a huge resource. You'll get a list of resources in your in the email you'll get following up from this, but there are a lot of different virtual opportunities to access community, both for parents and for youth out there. But really, community and environment are hugely important, both for your child and for you. So reaching out to LGBTQ plus centers and resources that are local to you. And if you need any help with accessing those things, I'm available to help you facilitate that with I'm available to help facilitate that for you, as is Elena, and we can get those questions answered and kind of help you with what your specific situation might look like, depending on where you're at with your child and locally and all of those different pieces. So again, make sure you're taking care of your own mental health. You don't need to be a therapist. There are plenty out there, and we can help you find one if you need help with that. And you just want to be in a space where you can empower your child to take control of their own behavior, to learn about themselves, and to live the life you want them to be able to live. It'll be a good time. Q&A. How do we do on?
Doing great. Yeah, we don't need to do a survey. We're good for that. So you can be done sharing if you want to, sharing your screen. And I think the only thing I wanted, as people are thinking of any kind of questions that you want to put out to Megs in the group, feel free to put those in the chat. And I think the only thing I kind of wanted to throw in here was that for me personally, one of the biggest struggles was the listen part. Anyone who knows me knows that like every emotion is shown on my face in real time, which is a real problem when you're trying to be empathetic with your teenager, because as they were telling me how isolated they felt and how lonely and how they felt this pressure, right? All of these like pretty negative emotions. And here's my baby, who are going through these negative emotions. And so what's going across my face is anger and sadness and frustration and a lot of self-anger, right? That I didn't see signs, that I didn't see what was going on, that I was too absorbed in my own life, whatever it is, right? The parent guilt is real. And so my child was sitting there on the bed across from me, seeing all these negative emotions going across my face. And of course, internalizing them. Now mom is upset with me. Now I've made mom sad. Now I've made mom frustrated, right? And it wasn't that, but they didn't have a way, again, like their poor disabled brain without that prefrontal cortex, like they didn't have a way to be like, this, it's not me, it's not my fault, right? And so I think if I could go back and do anything, it would definitely be some of those initial conversations where I didn't understand how to get myself out of the way so that I could truly be there for my kid and with my kid in that moment. And listening is still definitely probably the biggest thing I still work on. Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to throw that in there. And again, as people are kind of formulating their questions, I did have one for you, Megs. How I found out about my child was through the school counselor. They overheard a conversation between my child and another child talking about the wounds on their skin. So that's how I found out. In your situation as the school psychologist, how are you all finding out? Like, what are the clues and the things that you're seeing on your end?
It kind of varies. I work in I happen to work in a school where I would say probably 60% of our students engage in self-harm on some level. And so we get a lot of that information from parents, but it's we'll see scars fairly frequently, or they'll make references to having done it, or kind of allude to it, usually to a staff member they're working with on a daily basis. So we have paraprofessionals in the classrooms, and they usually get the most information because they're
and I swear, I think, like, at least in my situation, I think she had that conversation in front of the school counselor, almost like subconsciously hoping that an adult would hear it. You know what I mean? Like, my gut feeling is there. Like, and I think kids do that. I mean, they're not secretive most of the time. They think they are, but they're not.
Yeah. Subtlety is definitely not their forte for many. And yeah, it is. I mean, we all kind of have behaviors, right? Where it's like, we're not, we kind of know what we're doing. And there's this sort of underlying consciousness of like, I hope maybe somebody hears, because I don't know how to directly ask myself.
Exactly.
Or, they with students, I think they maybe will know the role of some support staff, but not necessarily know if they're even able to access them, or how to ask, or if they have to do something specific, or if their peers see them going into a specific part of the building or a specific office. There's some stigma with that too for some students. So that makes sense though.
Can we talk about, I feel like that there's a real space in self-harm for youth who are struggling with their gender identity. I feel like that really manifests in self-harm when they're really trying to figure out what this body is and how it connects to their soul. Is there any specific advice or guidance you could give us there when it's our kid that's struggling with gender identity?
About where that's coming from, or what it looks like?
Or how to address it, maybe? Like, I don't want to put words in their mouth. Like, are you struggling with being a girl? Like, I don't want to put words in their mouth, right? But at the same time, like, I think it's really important to address gender identity, right?
Yeah. I think, I mean, certainly speaking secondhand here, but with gender identity, I think it's such it's both an internal crisis, and every time you're in the mirror, this external crisis of, I don't look the way I see myself in my head, or the way I look doesn't match the way I feel. And there's some self-loathing with that. There's frustration, anger, all of these different elements that in emotions, I think that can come with that. And sometimes it's like, well, I don't like this body, so I'm just gonna, like, it helps me to, when I'm able to kind of alter it in some way, it maybe more matches the way that I actually feel on the inside. Or for some folks, I think there can be kind of this self-loathing kind of punishment component to it, where you just can't deal with what's going on there, and that's the release you can get. Does that kind of answer the question? Or
I think so. Is there a way? I think there's a concept of like body positivity, and it comes from like a different place when it is working with a kid who's struggling with their gender identity. So do you have any suggestions on like how we can increase body positivity with a child who is struggling with their gender identity?
I think as far as body positivity goes, I think it's access to things, to external things you can do, because there's only so much you can do with a body that you currently have, right? But different ways that you can create a more affirming expression, whether that's with binders or a gender affirming haircut or gender affirming clothing, and ways that they can look in the mirror and see at least a bit more accurate of a picture of who it is they are. Now, for some students, another element is it might not be safe to do that in like a school setting or outside of the home or whatever, but at least getting some of these elements or knowing that in the home environment, it's safe to express themselves in that way and have access to those things, and at least the option to have parts of their day where they can look in the mirror and be like, damn, this is me. I look pretty good, you know, and kind of get those little, those sparks of affirmation. I think we can't control every environment our kid is in, but the ones we do have control over, I think are huge for kind of mitigating some of that, or at least being able to access the memory and have that feeling in their bank.
For sure. I love it. We do have a few more questions. One is, where are the kids finding information on self-harm these days? So like, is it coming from conversations with kids at school? Is it coming from the social media, right? Or like, I even found I was watching a Netflix show with my kid, and it was like a single mom with her teenage daughter. And I was like, look at this, we're having a bonding moment. And on like episode 7, the teenage daughter started cutting, or no, she was burning actually. And my daughter was like, what are you having me watch? It was an intense moment. So I feel like it's coming from everywhere. Are you getting that perspective as well?
I would say so. And I think there are ways where the intent is to be positive, right? Like, I'm sure that was a part of that show because they're trying to kind of, in a way, normalize, not like normalize that this is like an adaptive way to do something, but normalize the experience of other people out here have the same urges, have the same behavior, have a similar level of stress that is impacting them to the degree where this is something that they're engaging in. And so you're not alone out there, and it's intended to be positive. I've never been to it myself, but I'm pretty confident that there's probably a self-harm corner of TikTok or any social media platform, certainly the internet in general, where there's a level of peer association where it feels like a community building or bonding experience or
these people
whatever.
Get me.
Yeah, that kind of a thing. But I think there are definitely, we have pockets of students who, if one friend starts in on it, there can be kind of a copycat effect, but the copycat effect is happening more so because I think their friend is reporting, this made me feel better, not like this is a cool thing and like I'm a baddie because I did this, but it's like a positive experience for them. But also because we have staff around literally every corner in my building, it could also be an element of kind of asking for help without asking for help.
I get it. We do have a question. Can you talk about the difference between the role of school counselor versus school psychologist? And I definitely think from the parent perspective, I'd like to know that. Like, to me, a counselor is a person who helps them figure out their school schedule. But is that?
There are, it kind of depends on the structure of the district, the structure of the building, and the way that different schools kind of use those roles. But you can pretty much bet that a counselor is, a lot of times they get assigned by like alphabet, right? Like you got A through M, you got whatever the rest of the letters are. I'm not a counselor, so I don't need to know that. And they help with like making sure you got all your credits, giving you your schedule, helping you look at colleges or apply for scholarships, those kinds of things. They also have I would imagine the training is variable, but some mental health training as well. There's certainly a great starting point if you just need someone to talk to, because most kids have at least had one interaction with a counselor, which is why I think they come immediately to mind for most people, because we've all had that experience of meeting with your counselor, what do you want to do after school, like all that stuff, which is cool and super important. But it is different than school psychologists. So school psychologists function also differently in depending on the district they're in and in what they do. I've been a school psychologist in 3 different districts and in 3 different states, and my role has been different in each of them. And I've worked with students from birth up to 26 years old. So the primary thing that I have done in my work is we are we coordinate the evaluation process within special education. So we help special education teams to identify different needs, accommodations, modifications that are needed for students who may need special education or who are already receiving special education, to determine what those needs are, or if their needs have been met and they don't need special education services anymore. That is one component, but it's what we're most famous for. We're also trained in mental health. So in my role, I do a lot of trainings like this, where we're kind of building capacity in staff members to support students to understand mental health. I don't personally do a lot of one-on-one counseling, but there are psychologists who love doing that or have room for that in their schedule, or that's just the way they're utilized in the district. So there can be, and it's not therapy. That's an important piece too. It's a mental health service. The idea is within the context of education, right? So the idea is to get some of those mental health needs met so that we can maximize their success in education, from academics to social emotional learning skills, and all of those components that go all the way up to work skills and things of that nature. And what's the other thing? Social workers. They put out fires. That's what social workers do in our building, but they coordinate more like accessing community agencies, which psychologists can do as well. There's a lot of overlap. It just sort of depends what the team is. But social workers are more in that realm of getting connected with community services. They can do some counseling as well. And it really kind of depends on the person in the district. But if you ask for someone on the mental health team, you'll probably get one of those 3 people.
I found, so it was the school counselor that called me for my daughter, and she was the one that was like, let's figure out what your schedule is going to be. Like, she was that person, and found out from other parents that she had notified them as well. There was like a serious it was in the height of COVID, and there was a lot of self-harm going on. And the only resource that she was able to give parents was the state crisis line that would bring in a crisis team and would determine if your kid needed to go to a facility or not. Like, that was the only resource that was given out. And that started my wheels turning to realize, like, okay, the school is not supporting the staff at all with the actual help that they need, which led me to realize, like, she was in a school that was really homophobic, and that was probably causing a lot of the issues. And now she's in a school that is not as homophobic. And I know that because they have a gay student alliance. They have a teacher that runs it. Like, they have counselors and a school psychologist. Like, I think the presence of that more rounded mental health team helped me realize, like, that was affecting the culture of the school and making it a safer place for my child. I'm sure that's not everywhere, but that was definitely where it was for my kid. Thank you so much. I'm just going through and checking to see if there are any other questions, and I don't think there are. We're not shutting down right now. Still got a few minutes. If you do have any other questions that you want to talk about, we have had a few people have to leave, and they sent me some really sweet messages that this was really helpful for them, and I'm so glad. This is so good. I'm just trying to think of any other common questions or the burning questions that I had at the time. And I think we all know this, but I think we need to hear it from you, Megs.
Yeah.
Is self-harm something that a parent's behavior or words can cause?
That a parent's behavior or words can cause. Yes. Yes.
Tell us more.
Which is, that is a lot of pressure, right? Because we put a lot of effort into trying not to say the wrong thing. But there are, I think, parents' words or behavior can, like we've talked about tonight, can also help to bring it back. And we've all said things that maybe have been misinterpreted, or we didn't mean, or had a bigger effect than we even knew. I mean,
right.
I am positive that I've said or done things that have significantly hurt or impacted students or youth that I've been serving that I have no idea, and I might never. That just seemed like kind of an everyday thing for me, and so it's I think it's important to be mindful of where you're at, and if your child is sharing something like that, where you've said or done something that has made them feel some kind of way, or act in a certain way, having that conversation and allowing yourself to, like, yes, be a parent, but also to be a human. That's kind of, I think, the best you can do to try to come back from that, in addition to providing resources in a space for your child to be able to work through and manage and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting distinction, because in regards to sexual orientation and gender identity, nothing that we do as parents causes a change in sexual orientation or gender identity. That is innate within the human, right? Sorry?
Tell you what, wouldn't that have been nice?
Wouldn't that have been interesting? But what we are responsible for is how we support them after we have that knowledge, right? And so that is where we are. That's where the responsibility lays with us. It is not with who they are, but how we are responding to who they are, right? I would like to ask the question, what's the most dangerous aspect to self-harm? Can we assume that self-harm, if left unchecked, is going to go to suicide attempts, or not?
We cannot assume that. It is, things can go wrong. And I think sometimes possibly the act as it's being engaged in, depending on the intensity of the feeling or what's going on, or something slips, or it ends up kind of going haywire, it can lead to an outcome like that, which is what makes it scary and makes the intervention and the response very important. But I believe, let's see, it was I didn't put it in the slide, but less than 50%, which isn't necessarily a super comforting statistic, but less than 50% of youth who engage in self-harm actually have suicide attempts or complete suicide. Because, kind of like I said at the beginning, it's intended to be a mitigating factor to that outcome.
Got it. And I think that this is something that I would really like to address. There's a couple questions here. I'm going to start with what I feel like is really important, is how can we evaluate, right? The kid comes home from school. We now have this information, whether the kid has told us or the school counselor has told us or whatever. And then at that point, how do we know, okay, what is safe? Do I keep the kid here with me? Well, I'm a single mom. I have to work, right? So how am I going to do I keep them here with me? How do I know when I need to hand it off to a professional? How do I know when weekly therapy is enough versus like daily therapy? Like what are kind of those levels of care that you think we should be aware of?
If you're hearing something from school, most likely a threat assessment to some degree has been done. And I think kind of the protocol for that maybe varies by district. I personally did 2 threat assessments today. So it's something that's a fairly common occurrence or piece of my practice, just largely because of the students we serve is the frequency for that. But if there are references to that, or someone is calling to report, a lot of times there will have been some type of threat assessment or response where they might be able to give you an idea, depending on their level of relationship with the student. They might be able to give you some information about, in their professional opinion, based on the conversation that they had, where they think the child is at, just kind of out of the gate there. And then I think it's a matter of really creating kind of that wraparound support. How are they, as you're getting into like providing therapy or kind of assessing where their needs are at, it's checking in with school, checking in with the therapist, checking in with what it looks like when they're going to practice or if they're engaging in community things, and kind of seeing what the different lenses of the folks who are working with or around or existing within the realm of your child, to just kind of keep an eye on where they're at, because the way they present at home might be very different than the way they're presenting at school or in a sport or at an activity or at church or wherever you're hanging out. So I think it's continuing to access and communicate through that support network to kind of make decisions beyond the kind of more obvious ones of, this is not something where I can guarantee they can keep themselves safe, or they can be safe within, you know, the context of the house right now, and I need to get them to the hospital for some kind of assessment, or there's been some kind of self-harming that's led to something that requires more than Band-Aid or bandaging or something like that.
Yes. Good. We've got lots of questions coming in now, so I'm really glad people are feeling comfortable to ask them. Good. What happens? Okay, we've talked about like us talking to school staff, like us as parents talking to school staff, making sure there's a clear line of communication there. Now, I know that the answer to this question changes drastically state to state and even school district to school district. But if a child does have a connection at school, we'll say a school psychologist, and has admitted, I am cutting and I don't want you to tell my parents. How does that situation kind of play out?
Sorry. Well, we have to, we have to report. I mean, there's a level of safety there, and that's something that in my building, we when we have even just a threat of self-harm, it's just part of our process to report that because of safety at home. So that is something that we have to do.
And do you tell the kid that sorry, but I have to tell your parents? Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. Which is, you know, you want to be able to keep that trust, but you also want to keep that
child alive,
safe. Yeah,
that's right.
And that's just
what it comes down to.
The name of the game. But also, you know, it's like there are elements of confidentiality too. Like if there are elements to the why of this, is this occurring? Like if it's an outing situation or, you know, those kinds of things are different. We have a lot of students who aren't like out at home, or they have some behaviors that are related to identity or their sexuality, that it's not safe to report those things to, not safe or necessary to report those things to families.
Got it. Thank you for that distinction. I appreciate that. One question that we got says, when we check in with our kids, should we also ask questions about suicide? And while you're thinking about that, I'd like to throw in, like, in my family, that's absolutely what we do. I am a suicide risk because of my practice of going to conversion therapy a few years ago. And so that really opened the door to having that conversation with my kids, is like, we talk about suicide in my home. Like, it is a real thing that people struggle with, including your mom. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to make it enough. We're going to talk about it enough so that if you ever need to bring it up, you feel totally comfortable with it. And now we have included self-harm in that as well. Like, and for our family, self-harm includes like crazy eating that would really harm your body, whether that's restrictive or binging, right? It's about talking about prescriptive drugs and making intentional choices with them, right? Like, we talk about self-harm in a really holistic way so that when we need to, we can dive deep and get really specific into certain behaviors. But what about you? When someone says, should we also ask questions about suicide, Max?
I think if the conversation is open, I think it makes a lot of sense to ask, to just see where they're at, what their thought process is. If the answer is no, then the answer is no. But I think creating that space like you have, Elena, where it's an open conversation. This isn't a judgmental thing. This is just, where are you at? What kind of what can we do to support? And it's, looking at, do you have the thoughts? Do you have the means? And is there any intent there to engage in something like that, or to execute a plan?
Absolutely. And we actually just last November did an ALP workshop like this. We actually had 4 or 5 different mental health specialists that were all keyed in on the specific topic of suicide awareness and prevention with our LGBTQ youth. So you can find that on our website at prideandjoyfoundation.com for sure, if you'd like to check out that workshop as well. One last question that I have on here, and then I think we will close it up because we are at time. Is there ever a time when we as parents are out of the woods, so to speak, right? So my daughter's experience with this was about a year ago. I certainly don't feel out of the woods, but is there ever a time that I can feel out of the woods? Or is that just like the existential crisis for parents in general? That once they come out of our body, we're screwed.
Existential crisis. Yep. But sort of. I think here's the thing, is the way you define out of the woods. I think out of the woods with being defined by equipping your child with the skills to manage it to the degree they are able on any given day, to develop some positive self-care and accessing therapy and resources, and really building up that skill of advocating, of being able to say what it is they need and understanding how to get it. Because I don't know that this is for everyone something that just goes away and stays away. It really becomes more a matter of managing it, and there can be relapses where those urges might come back. This is something that adults engage in too. That's another thing that I think isn't commonly talked about either, is people identify this as like a youth problem, but teenagers grow up and they become adults, and a lot of those feelings they have to continue to manage and to work through. So I think you can get closer to the edge of the woods, as it were, but out would be would be difficult to define, but there is definitely hope for that skill development and really developing more self-awareness and ability to successfully advocate to a level that they can lead very like thriving, awesome queer lives.
I will say, like, I'm not grateful that my daughter went through the experience, but I am definitely grateful for the vocabulary that we have now and the depth of relationship that we have now and like the authenticity that we're able to bring into our conversations, because we've kind of gone to the worst of the worst, right? Like we've talked about the worst of it, and now like it feels like every conversation is easier because we've gone to that depth. Okay, sorry, I said that was the last question, but I do feel like if someone popped one in, I do feel like it's really important. All right, Megs, let's say in a world where you had, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 kids yourself, knowing what you know, at what age would you start to talk with your kids about self-harm?
What in a world where I had 5 or 6 kids, I'd move the heck out of this apartment, tell you that. Great stall on my part, well, I think. It comes up 9 or 10 years old, you can really see some of those behaviors start to develop. I see a lot of students who will just like hit their head as a means to kind of to regulate or be like, don't, like if they get something wrong or something like that. But where you can start to engage in those conversations about how does that help you, or what is it that you're feeling, or kind of starting to identify a feeling with a behavior and how that behavior is helping them, and then kind of you can build in some ways to replace that, or building alternatives, or kind of building that self-awareness from the get-go.
Agreed. Thank you so much. We are going to wrap this up. Thank you so much. Thank you for the time and the expertise and everything. Thank you everyone for being here, for being willing to be here, for being willing to take in this information and then use it to advocate for your loved ones and for the people that need it. A point that I always try to make in these Pride and Joy parents meetings is that LGBTQ children are some of the only people of a marginalized population not born to parents of the same marginalized population. I think one of the only other communities that happens in is the deaf community. They're not always born to deaf parents. And there is a culture and a language and a clothing style, a history, a huge history to the LGBTQ community. And so it can feel like very easily for a child to feel completely different and other from the people that they share DNA with. And I think that is incredibly important for parents to realize. And I feel like once that realization is made, that's when parents realize, okay, I can be intentional and I can bring that culture into our family culture and integrate the two so that our child feels like they belong in our family, which I think is a huge part of what leads down the path of either gender euphoria or dysphoria, right? Either feeling like I absolutely belong in this world, regardless of what my orientation is, other than feeling I don't belong. I have to fight for my right to be here, to take up space. Like those are two very different mindsets. And we as parents can be in charge of kind of ushering them into the more positive mindset for sure. Any final thoughts, Next?
That was a mic drop. You should do a TEDx talk.
I should do a TEDx talk. That's a good idea. Maybe I'll talk to someone about that.
No, but thank you all for being here and for your time and just being awesome humans who are out here trying to support the queer kids. That is absolutely priceless and irreplaceable and life-saving. Awesome mug, Mom. You can find yours at megtheconnector.com.
I cannot even tell you how cute it is that your mom is here and like she was taking notes. Notes. Like she's that much of an amazing person. We all need a Colleen in our life, man.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Very lucky.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a fabulous night. And if you want to, please feel free to reply to one of my emails and just let me know like what you got out of this meeting and if it was helpful for you. And if you still have any outstanding questions, we will definitely address those for you for sure. Wonderful. All right, we'll close
Keep
it
the
down.
queer out there.
Thanks so much. Megs, I'm going to make sure that links to your podcast and Instagram and everything are also in the notes that are being sent to everyone. I think it's really important. I actually got quite a few comments asking what your podcast was. I think it's so important. Like it could be so good for parents to hear those stories of all people coming out and what are they doing with their lives now and how did their family respond and all of that good stuff. I think could be really helpful.
I'm trying to think which ones, maybe I could highlight a couple. I don't know how much self-harm combo specific. I mean, definitely more like suicide ideation, but you know, just some spaces for people to kind of see some success there too.
Some success. Yeah, exactly. Like there are incredible, successful, satisfied, happy queer individuals living their adult lives. Yeah. I love it.
What a concept.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, friend.
Thank you.
We're done. Okay.
We're done. We did it.
Done. We did it. We did the thing. I'll make sure you get a copy of the replay as well.